Hello, this is Witch Nikki, and I know that I was going to read a different story, but I found this one and I want to read it while I still can because I have that Dropbox thing, and so for a while I haven't been able to get into it, but now it seems to be opening up just fine for me. So, this is a story that I wrote. Um, After seeing two different things happening at the same time, but at different places, completely different, my mind meshed them together into a story. That's how it works sometimes. So, the print's big enough I could do this. I want to try to figure out how to put it into my other app that I have that I could, my writer thing that I could. Now, this is kind of a long story, so that's one reason why I'm reading it. Um, there might be parts where people go, "What's happening?" So I don't know. I've never really thought that when I was writing it out. It all made perfect sense to me. If you have questions after this is all done and I've posted it, and you want to ask me questions, what went on here, what happened there, that's the best part of this kind of um, format. I read it to you. You see me reading it, and you ask me questions. What better way to really read a book? The author's reading it to you, the story. Um, these are my short stories, so I might start classifying them there as short stories from my short story collection or whatever you want to call it. So I start out, it seems like, with this little note up here. I want to make sure that I've gotten it all. This it this story kind of has to do with depression, and I put a note up here. Um, I'm trying to decide if I want to read all of this. There's some of it I'm not going to share a read of it, but these are my thoughts that went before the story, so you could kind of tell if you want to get into it or not. Um, so, is it for children? You be the judge of that. Listen to it first before you put it out there for your kids. Is it silly stuff? No, it's not. It's very serious, and something very serious does happen in it. Something that I actually saw on the TV news, okay? Back in during the time when I wrote this, and I haven't quite, I think this was somewhere around early 2000-ish, around that time. Maybe 2001 or 2002. Probably 2002 to 2003-ish, around that time. So, do I go into the notes or not? That might make you decide if you want to read it or not. But it's pretty interesting story. It's not about this. I'm just kind of explaining what brought me to write it. So, note. No one really knows how long it takes for someone to get over the death of a loved one, or if we ever do. And when the death is murder, it takes longer. Sometimes the people around you might be suffering depression from a loss, such as a loved one. You never know. You never know when you might be in the company of someone who has a hidden disability. I am one such person. I am not writing this to scare people. I am hoping to open people's eyes to the fact that depression kills. It not only kills the depressed person, but anyone in his or her way. Depression is deadly when it has gone undetected or untreated. It can also be deadly if it is being treated wrong. There are many thoughts on this subject. I myself have been healing from depression for many years. Okay, I'm still healing from it. Okay, and anxiety and PSTD, post post-trauma stress disorder, PTSD. It can be deadly if being treated wrong. Okay. There are many thoughts on this subject. I myself have been healing from depression for many years. I went in for help many times. This method, therapy, and medication did not help me, but almost made it worse. I am not saying that people should not get this kind of help, but there are other methods to help you. Better ways. One method I am looking into. So I explained that, but I'm not going to go into that right now. The reason for that is it's very personal and it gets really long into it. Why I selected a different one, but now it pinpoints when. And I know that I wrote this in 2003. 2003 was when I went off of all of my medications. By all, in around 2000, I'll say, I was being given medications up to four different kinds. And I scrolled down. I went into it. I wrote into like a journal about that too. So let me skip down here to where it says, I saw images on the TV and the story formed in my head. The story is a figment of my imagination sparked by some actual events. Now, also, I was driving by a restaurant, a diner, whatever you want to call it. At the time, I'm not going to name them, it's not important. But I drove by it, and something was definitely happening there with police and stuff like that. So that's where these two stories merged. I did not know what happened in the diner, but it looked like police activity with yellow tape around and police cars and evidence, what do you call it, crime scene investigation team and stuff like that. So that joined with what I had already also witnessed on the news, which was horrific. My true condolences and sympathy to anyone that lost someone in any of the events that my story was based on. I'm not writing this with the intent of hurting anyone. I do not know if anyone in any of these events, I do not know anyone in any of these events. Once again, my mind made up every single character in this story. So when I saw on the news, I didn't know anybody's names. It didn't register with me. It was just like I saw the news happened, and then I saw this stuff happening down the street, and it just formed a story in my head. That's what happens sometimes with people, I don't want to say like me, but authors, people who write, see something happening in their lives and boom, a story comes to you. Okay, so my intention of the story was to draw attention to the facts that, one, many people suffer from depression, and two, they are not getting the help they need to heal. So, part one, 3 years and 2 cups of coffee later, as told by Sandra Johnson. This is where the story starts. Okay. Okay, forgive me because of glare and stuff like that, but I'm going to do the best I can. So, this is part one, 3 years and 2 cups of coffee later, as told by Sandra Johnson. Let me get a drink here. I loved my brother, and I will always love him. What he did was not his fault. He just never got the help and support he really needed to heal his depression. As if he could actually just forget the tragic loss of his beloved wife, Mary. Let me take you back 4 months ago. Frank and Mary were heading for their 50th wedding anniversary. They were 1 week from the party date. They had 3 grown kids and myself and our brother, Roland. We are not the biggest of families, no grandchildren, no more aunts and uncles, and no great-grandparents. Mary had no family. She had come here to the USA alone, starting over a new life. She had left no one behind in Dublin, Ireland. Sorry. She had been in the USA for 14 years. Mary had suffered a stroke 6 months before her murder. She was still weak and walking with a walker. No one loved each other more than my brother Frank and sweet Mary. Scrolling up a little bit. She was so kind. She volunteered time to help elderly people in retirement homes. She was a part-time crossing guard for a school district for 12 years. Children from many years back came to her funeral. Frank was a busy retired postal worker. He had worked for them 35 years and retired a year before his tragedy. Frank and Mary had great plans. Sell the house to their oldest child, Robert, and his wife, Sarah. They were expecting their first child, and Grandpa and Grandma felt it was time to move on and travel to see the USA, and perhaps to go back to Ireland, maybe for their final golden years together. These beautiful plans never came true for my brother and Mary. 4 years ago, they had gone to a retirement party for an old friend of Frank's. It was late, and although they had eaten at the party, they always had liked to have dessert and coffee before bed. Nora's family diner and coffee shop was open near their home, and it never closed. They ate there occasionally if they were up late and in the mood for apple pie for Frank and carrot cake for Mary, and always 2 cups of coffee for each of them. It was standard. I had gone out with them to other diners around town, and I had gotten to know my brother and wife very well after my own Jerry had died 6 years ago from a heart attack. We went to movies and community events. They were all I had. Our brother Roland lived in Florida. We rarely saw him, and he sometimes came to visit, but not very often. I was Frank's baby sister, and Roland was our baby brother. Frank always took care of me all through school and college. He was there for me during those troubled years. He was Jerry's best man at our wedding. He was with me when I lost one of our one and only baby, and had to have a hysterectomy. He was a great brother. Anyway, he and Mary had gone into Nora's one last fatal time. Rachel Blanca, also known as Blanca Gonzalez, was one of the two waitresses that night, seated them at a booth. She was a single mother, and at the time going through hard time because of her husband had been shot in a robbery, and his murderers were still at large. Her and the other waitresses, Pamela Smith, were in deep conversations about what would happen now to Blanca and her kids. This was a new job for her, and she did not want to mess it up. Well, I'm glad you didn't know how long I had to pause. Let's see. Okay. Do we think that I can do without any more interruptions? I don't know. Pretty soon it will be quiet around here. So, there's no way to put a little mark or something. I should have just left I don't know if this, okay. So, okay. Let me just do this whole paragraph again. Sorry. She was a single mother at the time, because Ginger's still at school out in the living room, and I come to my room and pretend like I don't exist. Okay, so we're talking about Rachel, or also known as Blanca, and another waitress, Pamela Smith, we're talking, okay? And Blanca is what we're talking about now. She was a single mother, and at the time going through a hard time because her husband had been shot in a robbery, and his murderers were still at large. Her and the other waitress, Pamela Smith, were in deep conversations about what would happen now to Blanca and her kids. This was a new job for her, and she did not want to mess up. Pamela was a young college student that lived with her younger cousin, Samantha. Samantha moved in with Pamela after her parents were killed during the terrorist attack on 9/11. Pamela and Sammy were almost twins. They loved each other very much, and they were all each other had. My brother and his wife ordered their cake and pie and first cup of coffee. They chatted happily about the anniversary party coming up only a week away. 50 years was special, and it was going to be a great event. Nora's was slow this evening. There was a gay couple in the corner booth sharing a salad and an order of fries. There was a huge man and his petite date sitting nearby. While Mary and Frank ate and talked, in came two rough-looking men. They sat at the counter and faced out into the restaurant. They seemed to be looking for someone. They spoke in low voices and did not speak very much at all to Pam as she gave menus and poured coffees they had ordered. They pushed aside the menus. They would be having coffee and no more. One man, which would later be identified as Taylor Jackson, was 45 years old, 6'3", weighed 215 pounds. He had a shaved head. You could barely see stubble forming on it, so he must have shaved recently. He had a tattoo on the back of his head that was a pair of eyes. He had 2 golden front teeth. The second man, Rock Jackson, was 27 years old, 6'2", weighed 206 pounds. He had his black long hair back near mid-back and cropped short on top. This style is known as a mullet, which was popular for whatever reason back in the 80s. He also had many tattoos, some on his face and neck, some leading up his arms. He had a long, jagged scar up the left side of his face, from his left ear to his chin. Scrolling up. With looks like this, they were found quickly and brought to trial. It was later found out that they were also the two at large. They were also the 2 at-large cold-blooded. It was later found out that they were also the 2 at-large cold-blooded killers that shot Blanca's husband. They sat just looking out into the diner, drinking cups of coffee. The huge guy stood up, and his 7-foot, 350-pound frame walked to the counter and paid the bill. Behind him was hidden a lady that was barely 5 feet tall and probably 95 pounds, if that. They left Nora's. The gay couple was in deep discussion. They could barely be seen, but they could be heard. Seems they were talking about a concert that they had gone to earlier that night. It was getting close to 12 a.m. Soon, the local bars would be closing and maybe people would stop in for a bite and coffee. It seemed this was a known fact as Blanca started to prepare fresh coffee. Pam busied herself cleaning the table that the huge man and his date left behind. Nora's, on this night, had a light crew working this shift. Randolph had called off this night. He was the other waiter. In the kitchen, they had a dishwasher and a chef. That was it. The manager was out in his car sleeping, taking a break because he had been working double shifts. Frank and Mary were finishing their second cups of coffee, and they asked for the bill. Pam finished her table and brought them the check and thanked them for dining at Nora's. Pam and Blanca then started to wrap paper napkins around silverware. They had nothing else to do at this point but look busy should Max the manager come back in. Blanca was telling Pam about Randy and Rita's plans to get married. Rita was Blanca's sister. Rita was looking for work and Pam had mentioned that maybe she should start working at Nora's because they needed a day shift waitress. Blanca liked the idea, so they were busy chatting when Frank came up to the counter to pay the bill. Mary was taking her time, having survived a stroke. Walking with a walker took her some time to get from one place to the next. No one had noticed that Taylor and Rock were no longer at the counter. They had taken off near the restrooms, but they actually had